All right. Hello, everyone. Whoa, I like it. All right, I'm Adam Blitzer. I am the EVP and GM of the Sales Cloud at Salesforce. But as you just heard, prior to that, I founded a company called Pardot, which is a marketing automation provider, and founded it in Atlanta in 2007. Now, how many of you guys have heard of Pardot? How many of you guys thought it was pronounced Pardot when you first heard it? All right, how about Pardot? All right, that's the more sophisticated way to say it, right? It's like Target, Target. I'm waiting for people to start pronouncing Uber like Uber. I need to get an Uber. And then there's like the one person from Boston in the crowd who pronounces Pardot like Pardot, which is kind of cool too. So why is it called Pardot? The answer is because we had $8 to spend on a domain name. So it's pretty mundane. Even by 2007, every domain name out there was taken. Anything that was short, anything that was easy to remember, it was already taken. And my co-founder and I, we wanted a name that meant something to someone somewhere. Like, think about that. That is a super low bar. And fortunately, we tripped over it, so that was good. We looked up marketing in dictionary.com, and it used to translate it into lots of different languages. Anything was short was taken until we got to the 23rd entry. So Pardot, or Pardot, is Latvian for to market or to sell. So we don't yet have a customer in Latvia, but we're going to be super excited when we get one there. So we joined Salesforce through an acquisition in 2013, and Pardot was part of the Sales Cloud. So you might be thinking, this is a marketing automation solution. Why do we put it in Sales Cloud from an organizational perspective or an HR perspective? Well, to us, it really speaks to the idea that sales and marketing needs to be extremely tightly aligned in B2B. For myself, to move into this new role, which I started this year as the head of the Sales Cloud, again, that speaks to, at Salesforce, our thinking around sales and marketing needing to be aligned. So really, really excited about that. It's worked fantastically well, and it's been a great match. So that's a little bit of the background on Pardot, on Salesforce. I also want to give you a sense of my background. So you look at me on stage, you see this guy with bad posture, this bald and actually right now sunburned head. And you look at me and you think, that guy has lived hard, right? Some of you are probably thinking that. But it wasn't always like that. I used to be that guy, that handsome fella in the top of the screen. I'm serious, that was me. Those were better times. So that was me at the tender age of 21. And I used to do a sport really competitively called Judo. Anyone ever done Judo? No? You can tell it's a super major sport by the two of you who nicely raised your hands. It is an Olympic sport. If you don't know what it's like, picture two guys wrestling, but picture them doing it in pajamas, and that is Judo. But it's Japan's national sport. I spent about 4 years there doing Judo really competitively. I've actually, I did Judo pretty competitively for about 15 years. And what I loved about Judo, what I loved about wrestling is it's a very honest sport. It's one-on-one. You're out on that mat with your opponent, and it's all about prediction. It's all about anticipation. It's like a physical chess match. And when I used to compete, there were 3 levels of athlete that I competed against. The lowest level, the people that were easiest to beat, you would come in to make a move, and in Judo you try to throw someone, that's how you win. You would come in and try to throw someone, and they couldn't even react. They couldn't tell by your body language, by your posture, what you were about to do, and so you would just come in and you would be able to throw them and you would win. The second level, the level that was much tougher to beat, were the people that could react. You would do something, they would counter. You would do something, they would counter. And the faster your opponent could react, the better they were, the tougher they were to defeat. But the third level, the level that are sort of like the Olympians, the toughest people to beat, were the people that didn't need to react because they could anticipate. They actually knew from your posture what you were about to do before you did it. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck does this have to do with anything? Did this guy just get up on stage and he wants to show a picture of himself when he was super hot? Well, yes. But I also think this is how sales and marketing works. So I think about companies doing sales and marketing as those same 3 levels I talked about with Judo athletes. The first level, and this is actually where most companies still are today, are the companies that are getting signals from their buyers, but they're not reacting. So their buyers are downloading certain pieces of content. They're coming back to the website at a certain cadence. They're engaging sales or not engaging sales. But even though all those signals are coming in, the companies aren't using it. They're not doing anything with it. At the second level, the place where best-in-class companies are today, they are reacting. They're taking those signals and they're using it to adjust their marketing. They're using it to adjust their sales pitches. They're using it to adjust the cadence that they market or sell to that buyer. And the faster they do it, the more competitive they are. And the third level, the level that most companies aren't at today, but the place where we're all striving to be, is to really be predictive. To be companies that can anticipate where our buyers are going to land based on the language, sort of that body language or those hints that they're showing us today. So I think of it in very similar steps, at 1, 2, and 3. Some of these stats on the right, you've probably read by now, are not that accurate. I was never actually 2 meters tall. My eyes, though, are still brooding, as you can tell. What I'm showing you right now is a very simple funnel. That's basically how most of us learned how to market and to sell. We think of marketing as running their campaigns, generating leads. They're using lots of different channels. They're doing lots of good work. We're tracking across all those channels. They're handing things off to sales, and then sales is closing the deal. But as we know, and especially you guys in the room who are some of the most progressive marketers out there, this isn't really how people buy. The way people buy is a much more convoluted process. And this is really true now in B2B, but even if you think of your own life in B2C, think of the last time you bought a car. It wasn't like you engaged with marketing, moved on to a sales rep, and then bought the car. If you did, that's pretty good for the car companies. It worked, and they were really able to measure each step. But you probably bought it much more like this. You probably engaged with some marketing from the company. You probably talked to your friends. You read some blog articles. You tweeted out some questions to your followers. You got involved with a dealership, so you got involved with a sales rep. Then you went back to marketing, back to the dealer, and then eventually you bought your car. This is exactly how buying happens in B2B as well, because a lot of these channels that were previously B2C only, when we're talking about things like forums, when we're talking about things like social, which were primarily B2C driven in the early days, now they're full on in B2B as well. So this is really how that buying process looks. And what's interesting about this is when you see a model like this, you can't say, hey, marketing, you own the top of the funnel. Hey, sales, you own the middle and bottom of the funnel. Let's go do it. Because when you look at a model like this, both teams own the whole funnel, right? They own the whole sales cycle, and it's important for them to work together with one another. So we know that that's how we have to market and to sell. But in spite of that, most companies aren't doing it. A full 50% of companies say their marketing teams don't really personalize their interactions based on what they know about the buyer. Now, of course, they can personalize on easy things like demographics, what industry are you, what geo are you from, but they're not really personalizing based on other implicit signals the buyer is showing. How often are they coming back to us? What type of content are they engaging with, et cetera? And we're also not doing that on the sales side of the house. So most sales reps, or about half of sales reps, feel when they speak to a prospect, they don't have all the information that they could use to really personalize that conversation. So what can we do about this? And what is the cost of these two teams not being aligned? Well, the cost is actually pretty tangible. At the end of the day, what's important is it leads to missed revenue when sales and marketing aren't aligned and when they're not personalizing all of those interactions. And you'll notice, this is a combined sales and marketing miss here. At the end of the day, when marketing hits its goals, but sales misses its goals, who's happy, right? Basically nobody, because sales' goal is the same goal as the company. It's revenue. So really, that's what we need to think about from both a marketing and a sales standpoint. So what does this mean for sales and marketing? Well, I have a 3.5-year-old son, so I'm going to explain it in the same kinds of terms that I would use with him. I'm going to use superheroes. So on the left here, maybe we have our head of sales. On the right, we have our head of marketing. And they are usually at odds with one another. But it doesn't have to be that way. we could get them to be much more like this picture. But there are certain things we have to do to get there. So I'm going to break it down into 3 different vignettes, or 3 different tactics, that'll help get us on the road to that teamwork. The first is having a common plan or a common set of metrics between the 2 departments. The second is having marketing really be able to arm the sales team with the right content at the right time. And then the third is marketing really using all of the tracking and all of the information it's collecting around prospects and surfacing it to the sales reps so that they can strike when the iron is hot. So how many of you guys have a conversation that's a little bit similar to this? You know, sales is saying, hey, we missed our target, we need more marketing support. Marketing is saying, hey, we send you tons of leads, you're just not closing them. Right? This is pretty common, this conversation. And the reason that it happens is that the KPIs, the key performance indicators, or the goals are misaligned. So sales has a really obvious goal. It's the same at basically every company. It's revenue. The secondary goal is probably pipeline. That's a little bit of a shorter term goal. But really, the goal is revenue. Now, it would be nice if marketing's goal were revenue. But at most companies, marketing's goal is still not tied to revenue. It's, you know, at progressive companies, I'd say it's at least pipeline. But at most companies, it's still something a little bit fluffier. It might be related to the number of leads you're generating. It could be click-through rates on campaigns you're running. But it's something more removed from revenue. It's something a little bit softer. And when your KPIs are misaligned, you get into a situation where you're driving the wrong behavior. Because people do what they're incented to do. People do what their goals incent them to do. If marketing's goal is really about driving leads, improving lead flow, improving conversion, they're going to do everything they can to make that happen. And what that means is marketing's going to get really focused on generating tons of leads. It's going to shape how they think about their content strategy. They're going to focus on really top of the funnel content. They're going to focus on content that generates net new leads. And they're not going to think about all kinds of other opportunities like recycling lost deals, recycling dead leads, which takes an entirely different type of content. They're not going to think about the type of content that pushes someone from being a lead into an opportunity and from an opportunity into a deal, because they're not incented to do that. They're incented to drive their lead gen number. They're not incented to drive opportunity close rates. So we all do what we're incented to do. But if we think about having instead a more common scorecard where we recognize that really at a modern company, everybody does everything. Marketing and sales sell and market. Service gets involved as well. And you get this virtuous circle where we're basically always taking someone through the entire customer life cycle. What you get there is marketing realizes, hey, our content strategy needs to not just be focused on that top of the funnel, not just be focused on generating net new leads. We need to think about every stage of the buying process. We need to think about how do we convert someone from anonymous to known? How do we take someone from known to being an opportunity? How do we close an opportunity? How do we get someone into a cross-sell situation, a renewal situation? You really start to think a lot more holistically about the type of marketing you need to do just by shifting your goals slightly. As a nice side effect, when marketing's goals and sales' goals are a lot closer, you know, if you can get all the way to revenue, that's even the best, all of a sudden you've built a tremendous amount of trust between the teams because you have skin in the game. How many of you guys in the room are marketers that get measured on revenue? All right, so maybe like a fifth of the room. How many of you guys get measured on pipeline? All right, that's pretty good. So even at Salesforce, yeah, we're pretty sophisticated with measurement. Marketing tends to get measured on pipeline. So we're not all the way at revenue yet, but that's our North Star. That's really where we need to get to. So I'm not saying, hey, anyone who writes a press release needs to get measured on revenue, right? I'm not advocating that necessarily, but I would say that anyone in demand generation at your business should probably have some component of compensation that's tied to revenue. And then by getting that amount of skin in the game, you're going to build that trust with marketing and sales. You feel like you're in it together. So once you get together, once you have a common scorecard, you can really get to the same table between marketing and sales, and you can start to define things. You're going to hear from Serious Decisions a little bit later today. We like to think about a couple of their terms, MQLs, marketing qualified leads, SQLs, sales qualified leads. you can define those, and the key is to define them together. So this is probably pretty common for you. Marketing goes, they have like an offsite, maybe we go to Napa or something because we're in California, and you just bring the marketing team, and you're like, what is a sales qualified lead? And like, what are you missing from the room? A salesperson, right? Or defining a marketing qualified lead. That's how the vast majority of companies do it. It's fine, right? Salespeople aren't tasked with defining this stuff. Typically marketing is. But it's critical that you do it together. Because if you don't do it together, there's no sort of authority behind it, because sales hasn't really signed off on it, sales hasn't blessed it. So it's critical to do it together. Marketing has all the science behind this. Marketing has all the data on what is really making a marketing or a sales qualified lead. Sales has all the info from the trenches. The data is not going to be perfect, right? Often we're dealing with pretty small data samples in B2B. Sales, they know what's happening implicitly in the trenches, so it's important to bring those two together. Once you define these, then you can establish an SLA between the two teams. Marketing says, hey, if we generate leads that meet this criteria, you have to follow up with them in X amount of time. Sales says, okay, and if we do that and it doesn't work out, we can kick it back to marketing in this amount of time. And you get that kind of virtuous circle between the two teams because you've established your SLAs. Now, it's important that you don't just set it and forget it. You can always get better. And I'd encourage revisiting this every quarter. A lot of companies, they do this once a year. Things can radically change, especially if you're doing this for the first time. You're just going to continue to get more and more data. You're going to get more and more tales from the trenches. So I would revisit it every quarter. Now, how do you qualify leads? Well, a really common problem at companies is they have one score for a lead. So we think about lead scoring and we say, hey, this lead is an 85, or this lead is a 72. And the problem for most sales reps is they get that lead and they're like, okay, this is a 72. What does that mean? Like, I know it's probably better than the lead that's a 60, but I don't really know why. And the problem is, when you only have one number, you can't really tell if your lead is good because they're interested in you or because they're a good fit for you. Those are two very different things. So I always recommend splitting those two numbers, have a system that lets you grade interest, and have a way to grade fit, and keep those separate so that a sales rep knows, okay, this is a perfect fit, and I just have to generate interest, or, hey, this person is super interested, but they're never going to buy this. They're not a fit for our business, and it helps them right away know what kind of a prospect they're dealing with. Yeah. Yeah, so good question. So an example, what's an example of someone who's interested in your company but not a good fit for you? A really common example of that is someone who's applying for a job. They're going to show up like they're super interested in your company because they're looking at everything you do, they're looking at your pages, they're going to trigger a really high score in interest, but a really low score in fit because they're probably not going to be, from the right company, the right industry, et cetera. Or let's just say you sell to enterprises, someone from an SMB is on your site, they're really active, but they're just never going to be able to buy from you, because they're not the right fit from a budget perspective. And you can also flip that, let's say you do sell to enterprises, you have someone from GE come in, great enterprise, they fill out your form, but they've just done nothing else. They haven't engaged with your brand in any way other than kind of really basic top of the funnel content. So the idea is, you want to get someone that is high in both of those. But if you just have one number, you can't really tell where they came from. All right, so that was that first vignette. That's getting to establish, that really common scorecard between the teams. In the second vignette, this is all about content. So sales always says, we need more content, or they need a certain type of content. They need industry-specific content. They need content for the latest promotion they're about to run. Marketing says, why should we produce all this content? You never use it. And what's amazing is they're both right. Sales always needs more content, but they never use it. And there's this great stat, again from Serious Decisions, 70% of content that's created by B2B marketing teams never gets used. 70%. So think of the last 10 things you've done for your sales team, only 3 of those got used. It's pretty depressing. So why is that the case? Well, the first reason is that it's super hard to find. So how many of you guys in the room have a website for your company? Hopefully it's everybody. How many of you guys have an intranet for your company? Which one of those two things sucks? Okay. So that's the answer. We spend all this time optimizing our prospect or customer-facing website. We invest in SEO. We make things super easy to find. You can slice and dice it in a million different ways. And then our own internal content repositories are just terrible. We don't think about them. They're total afterthoughts, and we just chuck stuff in there. Or we just chuck stuff in Google Docs. And we're like, it's in there. Go to X, Y, and Z and find it. So we don't treat our sales team like we would treat our customers or our prospects. The second is, it's persona agnostic. So a lot of this, again, comes from that kind of KPI conundrum I talked about. When marketing is really focused just on generating leads, they're not thinking about, there might be multiple buyers involved in a buying decision, so getting someone over the hump. They might need an executive targeted piece of content. They might need a stakeholder piece of targeted content, a technical buyer's piece of targeted content. Same with stage. They might need an early stage, middle stage, later stage. If we're in the very early stages, I don't want to hit you over the head with information specific to my company. I'd much rather do thought leadership about the space in general. You're not ready to hear about why Salesforce is amazing. You're just trying to figure out CRM in general. As you start to move down, in the buying process, then I can start to get you case studies, start to get you more interested in what other companies are doing with CRM. And then, finally, at the end, we can talk to you about why Salesforce is amazing. But if I do that all the way at the beginning, it's not really aligned with where you are in the buying process. But because most marketing teams aren't really, incented to think this way, there's really sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to stage-based content. And then the last piece is almost all companies produce 100% of their content as first-party. So first-party content is just, everything is coming from your company. You're not curating articles from third parties, giving them to your sales team, and having your sales team send them out. So think about, how much more likely that is to be well received by a buyer when a sales rep says, hey, check out this article in Forbes about, people tackling the same problems as you. So it doesn't have anything to do with your company. It has to do with your space. But all of a sudden, you're being helpful as a company. You're sort of, doing good. You're building the market. You're building awareness in your market. The marketing team doesn't have to produce the content, but they have to curate it. They have to make sure it's available to their sales team, available in their marketing. So really encourage you to take a look at third-party content. What we've done ourselves is we really tried to think of our internal sites in a lot of kind of the same way we would think of our external sites. So this is a view at sort of what our sales team sees when they need to grab content to send to prospects. It might be a little bit hard for you guys to see, but we put it all in one place. It's a one-stop shop. It's pretty graphical. We let them filter the content by type. We let them filter the content by topic. We let them filter the content by stage, if they need an early stage piece of content, middle, late stage. And we just make it really, really easy for them. We have all of the links, kind of pre-filled in there so they can really just click on things and it's kind of already set in their clipboard. But I would really encourage you to try to think of your internal content repositories the same way you would think of your external content repositories. If you have like a white paper library on your website, if it's good and it's easy to find things and it's easy to slice and dice, think about your internal content the same way. But we're a marketing automation company, or I was a marketing automation company. What I love is not just nurturing prospects or not just tracking prospects. I love doing this with our own team. So you can nurture your sales team. You're producing tons of good content. Get it out to your sales team by nurturing them with marketing automation and track what they're doing. Track whether or not they're using things. Track how they're using it. You can do it exactly the same. You have all these tools. You're doing it with your customers. You're doing it with your prospects today. Do this internally. And it really helps you with onboarding. It lets you know what's valuable, what's not. All right, so when you've set up your goals around content, I come back to this because, again, marketing has the science. You're tracking what content is working, what's not. Sales is going to have all the tales from the trenches. They're going to say, hey, I know it looks like this piece of content is doing well, but my prospects tell me they're looking at it, but it doesn't actually help. So be sure to balance those two things. just like you did with your KPIs. You're always balancing the hard science more with the tales from the trenches. All right, third vignette. So let's check how our heroes are doing. Are they feeling the love? All right, this one is all about speed. So sales says you're not getting us the leads fast enough, and marketing says you don't follow up fast enough, right? How is that possible? Speed matters. So in sales, speed really, really matters. This is a great stat from InsideSales.com. It says up to 50% of sales go to the vendor that responds first. This is a pretty amazing stat. How many of you guys have seen Talladega Nights? I used to live in Atlanta, so. Okay, so you know Ricky Bobby's slogan is, if you're not first, you're last. Or shake and bake, but really if you're not first, you're last. And by the end of the movie, he has like this heartfelt moment, and he's like, oh, okay, well, you could actually be second, or you could be third. There are lots of different places. But that's not true in sales. In sales, if you're not first, you're last. Sales is very binary, right? You either win or you lose. And you might be thinking, why is it such a huge advantage just to be first? But it makes sense. If you're first, you set the narrative for the deal, right? You set all the talking points for the deal, and you've set the framework for the deal. By the time your competitor gets into the deal, it's all about your strengths, and your competitor is backpedaling. The competitor has to respond to your narrative. If you get in second, you're responding to someone else's narrative, so it's critical. And when I say to get in first, it doesn't necessarily mean the first time someone has had any interaction with your company, but it's the first time after they've shown buying intent. So they've done something significant. Whatever you've decided at your company really shows intent. You're in there first before a competitor is. Now, why don't reps follow up quickly? We in marketing, we get leads over to sales reps. Why don't the sales reps follow up with those leads quickly? Well, there are actually lots of good reasons for this. The first is they don't even know that a lead came in, because whatever mechanism we have to let them know that a lead came in just isn't getting to them fast enough. Maybe it's an email, maybe it's some kind of report in Salesforce or view in Salesforce, but reps are living in 3 different places. They're living inside of the CRM, which is on a desktop typically. They're living inside of their email, so Outlook or Gmail, or they're living on their phone, right? It's one of those 3 places. And so if you're only hitting them in one, they may totally miss it. And they come back to it in an hour, and that person's already talking to a competitor. Or sales is just away from their desk. If they're away from their desk and all you've done is put it inside of the CRM for them, they're not going to see it until they're back. They might be working focused on closing. They might be working a hot lead, and they're not ready to talk to a new lead. Or finally, the lead was a bad fit, which hopefully you guys have solved by working on your definition of MQLs and SQLs with the sales team. The key for sales reps is, I've only actually heard 2 things at my days in Pardot that surprised me. One was someone told me we don't need hot leads. Like, what? That's crazy. That was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. We don't need hot leads. And the second was our sales reps are too busy to look at email. So those 2 things surprised me. But sales reps, for the most part, they want to be interrupted if you're interrupting them with something useful. So if you're getting someone a lead that fits the criteria of exactly who they want to sell to, they're not going to get mad at you. So it's important to push this to the 3 places where sales reps live. So I mentioned they live in their CRM, they live in their email, and they live on their phone. So make sure whatever mechanism you're using to notify sales reps that they need to do something now, you're pushing it to all 3 of those places. And you need to get as much as possible into that notification so that they're not jumping through hoops to act on it. So get them the behavioral info on that prospect. So what are maybe the last 3 or 4 things that prospect has done with your brand? That gives them context. Get them all of the dates. Get them all of the timestamps around when that happened. That gets them urgency. When they have urgency and context, they're able to have a really good follow-up with that prospect. They're able to strike when the iron's hot and know exactly what to talk about with the prospect. And then lastly, consider specializing the teams. So I mentioned, one of the reasons sales reps don't follow up with a hot lead is because, or they don't follow up with a lead is because they're working on another hot lead that they already have. One of the things we like to do is split up our team between what we call sales development reps, business development reps, and account executives. Sales development reps take all new inbound interest. Business development reps do outbound prospecting, and account executives just focus on closing deals. When you split things up that way, you're less likely to get into a situation where an account executive is too busy to take inbound interest from someone. All right, now it's important to put the solutions into the sales reps' hands. Now, you guys as marketers, most of us in the room are B2B. We probably have pretty small teams. So, even when, Pardot was 100 people, we probably had 4 marketers on the team. I think when we were 200 people, maybe we had 7 marketers. So, and how many sales reps do you think we had? At 200 people, we probably had 70 sales reps. So marketing is always going to be very outnumbered by sales. In B2B, that's typically how the ratios work. Think about your sales team as an extension of your marketing team. How can you improve your reach as a marketing team? By arming your sales reps with the right content and the right way to distribute it. So you're going to want to get your great email templates into the hands of your sales reps. Again, into the 3 places where they live, inside of their CRM, inside of their email, on their phone. Make it really easy for them to use. Let them add people to the campaigns that you guys are already setting up. So sales, again, they have all those tales from the trenches. They're on the phone. They know a deal's not going to close. Just give them one button to add someone to a campaign that you guys are already working on. And then really allow them to collaborate with your marketing team. Make sure that every quarter you guys are revisiting things between the 2 departments. Make sure that you guys are sitting with one another. If you, at most companies, you're probably sitting by yourselves. As the companies get bigger, you're probably sitting in different buildings, marketing and sales. As much as you can, try to embed at least your demand gen people with the sales reps. You'll really get an outsized return from that because you're going to understand what's happening day to day. And again, balance the science with the tales from the trenches. So, in terms of following up quickly, what's working, what's not, really take care, to not overdo it on the science, not overdo it on what the sales reps are telling you, but to meet somewhere happily in the middle. And then you get to a situation where everybody is doing well, you're rocking and rolling, you're getting measured on revenue as a marketing team, and you're happy about it because you're nailing the revenue number. When you get this right, you see good returns. This is sort of the opposite of the slide we looked at when marketing and sales aren't aligned. When they are aligned, you get things that are much more personalized. You strike when the iron's hot, and you have better context when you do strike. And you're going to see really, really positive returns. So guys, we have 10 minutes or so. I'd love to take some questions. Yep.
You said that the sales, 50% of the sales goes to the vendor who responds first. I like to challenge that. Your company, Siebel, was after, your company Salesforce was after Siebel. He didn't have a good enough product. Second, okay, it's not just responding first, it's having at least a good product.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Salesforce replaced Siebel, Google was the #7 search engine, and Mercedes-Benz had the automobile in 1886 and Ford was 1903. So what is the minimum amount that you need to be successful? It's not just speed, it's speed plus.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I would say in 1887, response rates in general were probably pretty slow, but they've gotten faster. So you're absolutely right. You at least have to be in the consideration set. You have to have a product that's good enough. If you have a terrible product, a terrible service, it doesn't really matter if you're first. I'm thinking if you're competitive, right? If you're in the competitive set, and let's say, in a given Gartner Magic Quadrant, there are maybe, 5 leaders, 10 challengers. If you're probably in one of those quadrants where you're all pretty good and you're all going to get the job done for a client, that's when tactics like that really matter. So this is really, being first is really a tactic. It's not a strategy, right? The strategy could be to have the best product. It could be to have the best ecosystem. And those are kind of enduring things that will help you. But a tactic is speed. A tactic is really being personalized in sort of that hand-to-hand combat of an individual sales deal. I will say often, though, you don't have to have the best product to win a deal. In fact, you very rarely need to have the best product to win a deal. you have to have a good enough product to win a deal. You have to be in that consideration set, and then tactics really dictate what happens in the deal. Any other questions? Yep.
I like your idea of separate teams, BDRs, account execs, but doesn't that then create a problem of the customer having to talk to 3 different people to finally get to the answer to the sale? And no matter how good your systems are, it's still another relationship that's got to be established and handed off.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So it wasn't my idea. Luckily, it was a much wealthier person's idea to separate out the sales teams. But it's a good point. Doesn't it lead to a lot of handoffs in the process? I think to some degree it depends on how your product is bought. You know, if your product is bought by one person and it's a really simple sale with a short sales cycle, you probably don't need all the complexity of that specialization because someone, you know, in one call, they just want to buy the product. If it's a little bit more complicated, and especially if there are multiple buyers on your side, there's probably going to be a situation where you're dealing with multiple people anyway. Then I think it makes sense. The biggest thing you're trying to do with specialization is you're trying to keep your AEs from determining if someone's a good fit. Because the best thing you can have your AEs focused on is closing business. And if they're ever spending time on a call with someone who's not going to be a good fit, you know, maybe they're not ready to buy, but if they're just not going to be a good fit, if they're going to qualify themselves out, you're losing a lot of money because AEs are pretty expensive. So I think it's a balance, and a lot of it has to do with how complicated is your sale. The less complicated, the less people you want involved in the process. The more complicated, the more enterprisey, then it's okay, I think, to have that multi-stage. But in either case, it's really 2 people. So I said we have 3 groups, but it's still 2 people. It's either inbound, outbound, and then the AE. Yep.
I like the idea that you brought up about nurturing your sales team. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like in your organization and what that nurture content, how you frame that to them as opposed to framing it out to prospects?
Yeah, great question. Nurturing your own sales reps. So at Salesforce, you know, when I think of the assets that I have, the biggest one, you know, one of the biggest ones by far is a big sales team, you know, feet on the street that are out there and have all the relationships with prospects. So with customers. So a big part of my job in marketing is actually to market to my own team because then they're an extension of my marketing team. We do, you know, basically different nurturing programs based on the line of business and the segment. So the Pardot team, for example, has like a Pardot Minute Clinic, where it's an email that can be digested really simply, and it's a 1-minute video explaining whatever is new in Pardot to the sales reps. Really easy to digest. They opt into it, and then we kind of track engagement from there. Also, most segment leaders at Salesforce have their own nurturing programs for their reps. They send it out personalized from themselves, so the open rate is really high. You can imagine when you get an email from your boss, you're much more likely to open it than if you get an email from, you know, centralized training, et cetera. But the key is they make them really short, easy to digest. That way you can still have a cadence that's pretty high. You could send something out weekly, you could send something out every couple of days, but each email in and of itself is short, snackable. You're probably reading it on your iPhone anyway, and you get something out of it. I don't know that a single person has unsubscribed, so that's good. Yep.
Within your marketing automation, how are you keeping track of your salespeople sending out content? Like, I mean, I'll cut off there.
Yeah, good question. So how do you keep track of salespeople sending out content? You know, salespeople send out a huge amount of content. You know, probably have a much bigger reach than you guys even think about. And you know, you think about the tools that they do this with. You know, they're using Gmail, they're using Outlook, and they're probably BCCing, you know, their 50 best accounts, or they're BCCing, you know, their 500 best account, and shooting out a message to them. And there's no reporting behind it. There's no tracking. So it's pretty terrifying, potentially. So I would look, there are a lot of different solutions out there that actually give sales reps kind of marketing automation in a box specific to the sales rep. And you know, it gives them access to templates that the marketing team has created. It might give them access to templates, you know, that the sales team has created, but marketing can at least see into those and see if they make sense. And then most importantly, it tracks it all. So you as a team, you know what's working and what isn't. Sales reps can start to collaborate. If I'm a rep in the Northeast and I see something that's really working in California, now that's not in silos, I can get access to it. I can get access to those same templates. So really you have to solve it with technology if you want to solve it. Realize it's not a scary thing to empower your sales team to fire off emails because they're doing it anyway. It's just right now they're doing it in a way that's not really tracked. And you can imagine how crazy it is with the current way of doing it. I once, you all get emails from recruiters, right? And typically, they send it just to you. It's a little worse if they BCC a ton of people. I once got one and they CC'd everyone. So they sent me an email about being COO of something, and they CC'd 50 people. So I was like, hey, who wants to do a group study for this opportunity? It should be awesome. So I think you have to solve it through technology. Anyone have any Judo questions? I'm good at that.
What weight did you train in?
What weight? 73 kilos. So 160 pounds. I had hair back then, so I was much heavier. 2 meters. 2 meters, exactly. It's a tough adjustment to go from an all-pro tight end to me, right? It's pretty awesome. Bonnie's like, who are the 2 most athletic people I know? All right. Yeah.
What are your top 3 reasons for telling a client to move to Pardot over another tool like Eloqua or
I think, why would I tell someone to move to Pardot over another tool? I would just say the visionary leadership. The biggest thing for me is I sort of don't really care if someone uses Pardot or a competitor. I just want them to use marketing automation because it grows the space in general. I think the biggest thing holding back marketing automation is a lack of people that really think in terms of marketing automation, that really think of marketing as this kind of more repeatable science than it has been in the past. So for me, I really just want to grow the space. And that doesn't mean just growing the space in terms of people using kind of the bigger marketing automation providers, but there are lots of solutions. I just went to a MarTech conference, Full Circle Insights was there as well. Just went to a MarTech conference, and they always put up this amazing infographic where it shows 4,000 different logos of everything happening in MarTech. So I really just want companies to adopt MarTech in general, to try things out, find out things that are working or aren't working for them, and it just grows the space for all of us. So that was my PC answer, but really it's visionary leadership. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Really enjoyed it.